The Indianapolis Colts finished the 2022 regular season with a 4-12-1 record and missed the playoffs for the second consecutive season. Heading into the year, they thought they were close to heavily competing for a Super Bowl as they narrowly missed the playoffs in 2021 with Carson Wentz as their starting quarterback and after losing the infamous Week 18 game in Jacksonville. So heading into 2022, they brought in veteran quarterback Matt Ryan and thought he could right the ship because they had all the pieces for him to work with. They had a running back coming off of an 1,800-yard, 18 rushing touchdown season in Jonathan Taylor, and they had a 1,000-yard receiver looking to take the next step in his third year in Michael Pittman Jr. But as we know, the 2022 Colts season went anything but according to plan. From a Week 1 tie to the Texans, to getting shut out the following week in Jacksonville by a score of 24-0, then coming home and beating the Chiefs of all teams, then eventually bringing in Jeff Saturday to be the interim head coach, and you get the point. You could honestly write a book about the 2022 Colts season because it seemingly never ended, and they eventually gave up the biggest lead in NFL history to the Minnesota Vikings in Week 15 to top it off. But now that all of that is behind us, the inevitable Colts rebuild starts now, and there's going to be growing pains this year, but they will be a fun team to watch, and there is a lot to discuss in today's video. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing something that, quite frankly, I'd be surprised if the Colts are anywhere close to as bad as they were in 2022, and that's turning over the football. The Colts led the league in turnovers by a wide margin, as they had 34 turnovers in 17 games, which is, well, an enormous amount to begin with, and the number 2 team in turnovers was the Texans with 28. And for there to be a 6 turnover difference between the first and second spot is like having a quarterback lead the league in touchdown passes with 45 and the second place quarterback to be around 36 or 37, meaning it's insane. And for reference, there were a few teams that tied with 22 turnovers, meaning a 6 total turnover difference between the Texans and the couple of teams that had 22 turnovers, and they were tied for 17th. So the Colts were an insane outlier in terms of just how much they turned the ball over last year. Granted, with a rookie quarterback, and especially Anthony Richardson, I do expect them to be in the top 10 or 12 teams in terms of total turnovers this year, because the reality is, there's going to be a lot of rookie mistakes, and especially early on. But the point is, it cannot be as bad as it was last year. And collectively, the Colts led the NFL as a team in interceptions with 20 on the year, and they also led the NFL in fumbles lost as a team with 14. And they finished 30th in points per game and 28th in points allowed per game. So for the Colts to even stumble their way to 4 wins despite having everything against them in this manner was honestly kind of a miracle in itself, but there is legit reason to believe in Indy's future. I'd be lying if I said I think they're going to seriously compete this year or make any noise in 2023 specifically, which should not be a hot take as they have both a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback in the absolutely loaded AFC. But what I really like about Anthony Richardson's game and ultimately the Colts' future, and I even wrote a piece on this on Patreon a couple of months ago, when you get down to the red zone, and this is when both Jonathan Taylor and Jelani Woods are on the field, as each are going to miss the first 4 games of the year, but when both are on the field along with Anthony Richardson, it's a successful drive for the opposing defense if they keep the Colts out of the end zone, and this is of course when they're in the red zone. And what the Colts are going to eventually try and do is build their team similar to what the Eagles had last year and bully their way down the field with a good ground game, and when they get in the red zone with AR, good luck to opposing defenses, because you'll need it. And in the scenario, you would have Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and Jelani on the field. Who is the main priority when it comes to slowing this team down? And oh yeah, they have a good interior offensive line led by Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly. And I know Quentin had the worst year of his career last year, but he's still a good player and teams would still love to have him on their roster. And for what it's worth, this will be something to monitor with Quentin over the course of the 2023 season, is how he plays in year 6. There were a lot of Colts fans that were understandably frustrated with him last year, especially after receiving the contract extension, only to go on and have the worst year of his career. But for the 2023 Colts season outlook and to look on the bright side of things, there were a lot of players last year for Indy that had bad years, and while it wasn't a horrible year for Quentin, it was a down year compared to the 3 first-team All-Pros we saw out of him from 2018 to 2020, and even the second-team All-Pro in 2021. So I do expect him to bounce back this year, and this next part is not a Quentin-exclusive comment because it applies to the whole team, but after the Dallas loss on Sunday night in Week 13 of last year, when they lost by 35 points after allowing a 33-point fourth quarter to the Cowboys, from a human being standpoint, how many guys do you think came back last year and just said, we're done with this season? Because after the Week 14 bye came the Vikings game, and we all know what happened there, then a home loss on Monday night the day after Christmas to the Chargers, in which they lost 20-3, then came the loss in MetLife Stadium to the Giants, in which Kayvon Thibodeau was celebrating a sack while Nick Foles was hurt, and then came the 32-31 loss to the Texans in Week 18. And that's a big reason why I like the Colts' future so much, because they had seemingly everything go wrong last year, and there is still a lot of talent on this roster. And one part of this roster that I think is severely underrated compared to the rest of the NFL is their front four. Everyone knows about DeForest Buckner, who has been a beast since being traded to the Colts back in 2020 and has had 50-plus pressures in 5 of the past 6 years. However, they also have Grover Stewart, who Colts fans know all about, as Stewart is a pretty underrated defensive tackle, and a guy who quietly had 70 tackles last year, and a guy who will look to continue to dominate the trenches with Buckner. 2021 first-round pick Kwity Paye is entering his 3rd year, and he is coming off of a 6-sack season in which he played just 12 games, and I loved Paye in the draft process back in 2021, and I think there is room for him to grow, meaning I think there's a good chance he has double-digit sacks for the first time in his career in 2023. And in free agency, they brought in former 49er Samson Ebukam, who was quietly productive last year. And Ebukam's production in 2022 was obviously overshadowed by Nick Bosa, who would go on to win the Defensive Player of the Year. Samson had a career-high 43 pressures for the 49ers last year, and maybe aside from not getting the same amount of pass rushing snaps as he did last year, there's no reason to believe Ebukam can't come in and have another 40-plus pressure season. And if this defensive line stays healthy, then there's a chance they have 3 guys with 40-plus pressures. I almost said 50-plus, but I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. All of this to say, I really like the front four they have, and this is without mentioning a player that's pretty good, and this is of course on the defense, not within the front four to be clear, but it's a guy who goes by the name of Shaquille Leonard. Leonard is a 4-time All-Pro, with 3 of those being first-team All-Pros, and there's no amount of good words to describe the difference he makes in this defense. And if Shaq is running behind these guys, and assuming he can stay healthy for most of 2023, of course, he's going to have another good year. At the moment, he is currently going through the concussion protocol, and if he can get through that and play most of the year, again, he should be back to normal. And one of the biggest differences for the Colts from 2021 to 2022 was, well, a lot of things, but the defense finished 28th in points allowed per game compared to 9th in 2021. But believe it or not, there's a lot to like about the defense this year, and this is why I believe in the long-term outlook for the Indianapolis Colts. They finished 5th in average plays defensively per drive and 9th in average yards allowed per drive in 2022. But a big problem for the Colts, and this goes back to team football and to the offense being able to help out the defense when they can, is the Colts' average starting position defensively ranked 27th, meaning they were put in bad positions a considerable amount, and that's a big reason as to why they finished 28th in points allowed per game. You could also say the Colts defense needs to create more turnovers this year, and while yes, that may be true, but having your offense turn the ball over 34 times in a season puts absolutely nobody in a position to succeed. And yes, losing a player like Bobby Okereke is not going to be fun, and especially in the first few games, but not continuously being put in positions to fail is going to improve the defense statistically really by default. But, and this is a big but here, The one part of the roster that really concerns me is the secondary. Opposing offenses averaged just 4.1 yards per carry against this defense in 2022, which, again, to praise this front four, was 5th best in the NFL. But the starting corners in Week 1 against the Jags are Dallas Flowers and Darrell Baker Jr., and while I like a lot of pieces on this roster, I think both of these guys and the rest of the secondary could be in for not just a long day, but several long days this year, because the opposing team's game plan entering the week, as simple as this is going to sound, is going to come down to a question, and it's going to be essentially, should we try and run at Defoe and Grover Stewart and have Shaq go sideline to sideline if our back gets to the second level, or should we go target Dallas Flowers and Darrell Baker Jr.? And when you're in the AFC, maybe outside of a few teams who don't have the premier quarterbacks or guys you think you can go far with, it's very simple. And that is one thing I expect the Colts to struggle with in 2023, and that's passing defense. And starting the year against Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley is not ideal for the Colts corners, and it's definitely not going to be ideal in December when they go to Cincinnati. But what I want to emphasize this year with the 2023 Colts is I think they're going to be in a lot of games. And because Anthony Richardson needs a development year, getting him in those live situations and having him and Shane Steichen grow together is going to be critical for not just Anthony's, but both of their developments. And by the way, I fully understand the Colts fans who will gripe about the lack of receivers on the roster, as I have absolutely zero idea what that's about, but I do like Josh Downs, and I thought the Colts got a steal with him in the 3rd round. And obviously the biggest thing to remember with the 2023 Colts offense is there's going to be very fun times. But there's going to be very bad times too, and with a project quarterback like Anthony Richardson, there's probably going to be throws where you look at the TV and wonder what the hell he was thinking, and by the way, that also applies to other rookie quarterbacks too. But from an offensive perspective of what I think they will try to accomplish, especially early on with Anthony, is I think they're going to keep a lot of his targets within 10 to 12 yards of the line of scrimmage and get him comfortable, and obviously with his cannon of an arm, take a deep shot or two throughout the game, because remember, you didn't attempt to buy a Lamborghini to go 45 miles an hour. These splash plays will come with Anthony with time, and he will be one of the most fun players to watch throughout the 2023 season. From a stat sheet perspective, I think Anthony will be around 2,800 passing yards with 15 passing touchdowns along with 12 or 13 interceptions, and have 7 or 800 rushing yards along with 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns. The 2023 Colts season is not going to be great in the win-loss column, but we know that, and that's okay. But I really like the pieces they have in place for the long run. The team MVP, breakout players, ceiling, and floor are on the screen, and I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as only about 23% of people watching are subscribed, and it makes a massive difference. Also, please check out Underdog Fantasy, as you get a free $100 deposit match, and with new users, they are gifting them a mystery prop, meaning it could be like a Patrick Mahomes, or an Anthony Richardson, or Justin Jefferson, half a yard prop. So you get the mystery prop and the free $100 deposit match using code Garrett or the link in the description. Definitely go check that out. And with it being the Colts team preview, I wanted to pay a little tribute to Pat McAfee, and so that's the reason for the tank top instead of the typical polo or the collared shirt. But until the final team preview, which is the Texans, please be safe and have a great rest of your day. Love you guys.